Now, thank you and welcome to TMJ News Live. We're waiting on our guest and interviewee for today, Setareh Sadeqi, and she will be talking to us live from Iran about everything going on.
Hello.
Hello, Salam. Welcome.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you.
For those who are just joining us, my name is Zainabrights, and I'm a journalist and editor-in-chief of TMJ News Network. Today we're joined by Setareh Sadeqi. I hope I'm saying that right.
Yeah, that's correct.
We're going to be talking about everything going on in Iran from someone who is living in Iran, is an Iranian herself, and a political analyst. Very honored to have you with us here today, Setareh.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and I'm happy that you're looking for hearing the voices of Iranians who actually live here, unlike what the majority of the mainstream media outlets are doing.
Exactly. And I think that's very important, in the field of journalism is to really, really hear from sources on ground and how they're viewing the situation. We can all comment on what's unfolding, but until you're not, in it, living it, it's very hard to say. So, Sitar, first things first, tell us what's going on in Iran currently, and how did all this begin?
Well, it all started with the tragic death of Mahsa Amini, who was a 22-year-old girl. She was from the Kurdistan region. I mean, in the west. She was from the Kurdish ethnicity, and she was visiting family or friends in Tehran with her family. And apparently she was stopped by the morality police, or what they call morality police in English, which is actually, like in Farsi, the word is like guidance patrol or something like that.
Okay.
Um,
Interesting.
yeah, so yeah.
Mhm.
So she was stopped, and then when she was taken to the police station, where they usually offer a few hours of like education,
Mhm.
which I personally find absolutely ridiculous, to be honest.
Mhm.
And I'm going to explain why. Um, and she, according the CCTV footage that the police released later on, she fell and then she went into coma and she was taken to hospital.
Mhm.
And a couple of days later, she died in hospital.
Mhm.
Um, so this, because there has been this scores for years that the morality police is not helping enforcing the law, and they have uh, totally unacceptable methods of enforcing the law. I mean, it's not always very violent, but even a few cases is not acceptable.
Mhm.
And that's what there was this discourse already, even before this happens.
Mhm.
I personally, for example, have tweeted about that in Persian. Um, it's not just me. There are a lot of people who believe in hijab. Some people even believe in the mandatory hijab, but they don't believe that the morality police is helpful. So there
Mhm.
was this discourse, and this was like the spark that ignited the fire, and everyone was really angry. They wanted transparency. They wanted an investigation into the case.
Mhm.
And so people took to the streets and they were demanding that an investigation was actually like carried out, that the morality police would be stopped, and some people also called for the mandatory hijab law to be stopped, be
Mhm.
removed. But as we went on, the subject of the uprising changed. People were asking for more. They were asking for more freedom for women based on the slogans that they were chanting. And some people were also calling for the overthrowing of the government, for the collapse of the government. And
Mhm.
that's why, that's probably one reason
Mhm.
that it got really violent. It got out of control in some cities, especially. And then the first just cause of the protest was, kind of going off the rail.
Mhm.
Nobody at one point, then you wouldn't hear a lot of people talking about removing the morality police anymore. They were just talking about like they were making bigger demands, which
Mhm.
I mean, people have the rights to express that as long as it doesn't get violent, and as long as like public property, police officers are not attacked, and yeah, I mean, as
So,
long as it doesn't
so
get violent.
the mainstream media, I mean, I'm here in America, in the United States, and a lot of the narrative that we were seeing was that she was violently beaten and she was tortured by the morality police. And now I think the narrative is changing after, that went viral. I'm not sure if the media is redacting their statements or they're, kind of softening the statements, but now it's gone towards, she died while in police custody. That means that the stress that was caused to her in that situation. Where are we at with the investigation? Is there any kind of formal autopsy report revealed, or, what do you have to say about that?
Well, yes, the thing that I mean, the report that the state media have been offering
Mm-hmm.
is that there has not been any beating or violent, detainment of this lady. But some people, for their own reasons, do not believe what they're told, and this is partly because the government has not really offered transparency in previous years. I personally would, I mean, the footage is pretty clear that she falls into her death, which is, I mean, even if it is because of the stress that she went through, it's totally unacceptable, and that's something that I hope they will reconsider as soon as possible. And I personally know people who have been detained and taken to the police station.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not like it's not that everyone who's stopped for their like dress code is taken to a police station. It's just usually they're just reminded, they're told to correct it on site. It doesn't
So
take the next step.
at what point does this escalate into something bigger like detention?
Well, that's another problem with the morality police. There is no clear like a structure for that. It can
Mm-hmm.
be totally based on the personal judgment of the morality police officers.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you would never know. Like someone would be dressing totally against the like the law or the dress code, and they're not even stopped, or
Mm-hmm.
for different reasons, because maybe they're driving in their personal cars, because they are in a region where there is not, because the morality police are not always everywhere. Uh, they're in certain places. Sometimes there are more in like more places, sometimes not. So that's one thing. That's one thing that makes it difficult to know why and how and what point people are like actually arrested and taken to the station. Um, Mahsa Amini's father said that she's been, she had bruises on her legs. This is what he said. But the report by the state says that there has not been anything like that. And they even released the scans of her brain, which shows that there wasn't a like like a trauma or beating of her head, which could have possibly caused this. But still, it doesn't change like, you know, the main point, the main grievance that people have. And so that's why people haven't been given up, because they want to pursue until they hear something from the government that they're going to reconsider the law. I mean, it's actually that they were talking about it well before this happens, but it never got serious. And these protests have been, I think, a clear, loud statement from the people to the state. Um, yeah, but I mean, at this point, we don't have as many protests going on anymore. And yeah, I mean, another point is that because this is a social issue, you won't, I mean, there are social issues that a lot more people respond to and want to be a part of the protest. But this one was not something that, um, I mean, it wasn't that you could see a revolution. Do you have my voice and picture?
Yes, yes, you're good.
Okay. Okay. So,
So Sitar,
remind me of what we were.
guide me through, the process. So there's actual grievances against the hijab mandate. Even would you say this is the majority of the people in Iran, or there are people who support the hijab mandate? What is this hijab mandate, and why has it become such a big deal?
Well, of course, there are a lot of people who are in favor of even the hijab mandate. Some of, like, a proportion of these people are probably in favor of the morality police. Some aren't. But I would say the vast majority, almost like everyone, is against the way they enforce the law. Um, there are different surveys that show that still a great proportion of the population is in favor of the hijab mandate. And the statistics, like the survey shows very different percentages in different provinces, because it has to do with the cultures. Like in one, and that's why the protests that we are seeing are very different in different cities. For example, in my city of Esfahan, because it is known as a traditional, like people are more traditional, we didn't have as huge protests as, for example, you saw in Tehran or in Rasht or in some other cities, where the culture was that, like, the hijab or the dress code was already kind of laid back, and it wasn't that strict, and so people didn't want the morality police, and this really made them angry. But in Esfahan, I have, like, personally experienced that, for example, even in places that there are no morality police, if someone walks down a street where that area is known as being more traditional, more.
Your
Is the
internet
connection
seems to
problem
be,
on my side?
looks like it.
Okay, I can imagine, because yeah, that's one thing that has happened, that a lot of, like, Instagram was not blocked in Iran, but with these protests it has got blocked, and I didn't have a lot of connection problems until a couple of days ago, but since yesterday it's become very difficult. I have to use a VPN, and that makes it very difficult to connect. So
So let's
yeah, I'm
let's talk
sorry.
about that. I mean, as American as I am, I really feel strongly when it comes to censorship, right?
Mm.
But like, how do you feel about the censorship? What exactly are they censoring, and why are they doing that?
Well, obviously, I'm really unhappy and angry at the censorship. It makes it because there are a lot of people in Iran that are making money through Instagram. Like, they sell products and they offer services. I personally had to cancel 2 classes and 2 interviews yesterday, because my connection was, like, it wasn't working at all yesterday. It was very, very difficult. And it makes, like, the vast majority of people very angry. And I think that's one thing that fuels the protests. Like, there are a lot of people, it adds more reasons for people to want to take to the streets. and but still there is a minority that is in favor of these censorships because they think these social media platforms by imperialist powers may affect Iranian culture. They see it as a source of like cultural invasion of their country, and they are against it. But I would say, I personally don't know anyone who believes that, but I know that there are people with that mentality, I mean, with that idea.
And what would the reason be for these kind of censorship bans, or the restriction of social media just for a few hours, or why are they making it difficult? Is it a
At
security issue?
Yeah, at this point, I think this is my personal idea, and I cannot verify it in any way. But I think it's because of the protests in some cities. Like they, during certain hours, the connection becomes worse, and I guess that's probably when the protesters are planning to take to the streets, and it makes coordination more difficult for them through the internet to want to plan something. Um, I mean, I'm talking about this new one, the new limitations and restrictions. Like, while a lot of people were having problems until like a couple of days ago, I really didn't have any problem connecting. It was just that a couple of websites and applications got blocked, and then I would use VPN because I just naturally have to use that because there are a lot of other platforms that were already blocked. It was different also from one neighborhood to another neighborhood because in my neighborhood there was absolutely no protest, no unrest at all, and everything was like absolutely normal. So if someone walks in here in my neighborhood, and not just here, in a lot of other neighborhoods, you wouldn't realize there has been anything at all. So we didn't have connection problems. But if you go like for example downtown, then it
Because from our perspective, we're feeling like, that's a huge thing going on and everyone's
exactly.
protesting everywhere. That's interesting.
Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. And I had an interview on Friday, and I mentioned that the scope of these protests are like it's much smaller than what happened, for example, in 2019 when the
Mm.
protests were over fuel prices and economic grievances that people had.
Mm.
And I got you can't imagine like my DM on Twitter and on Instagram were flooded with death threats, and which I mean I usually have something like that after interviews that I do,
Mm.
but this one was like unprecedented, and
Mm.
only because I said that the protests are not as big as they were in 2019. But that's the reality. I mean, even I have family members who took part in the protests.
Mhm.
Okay, I mean, like at least, yeah. And one of them even was shot by rubber bullets while he was taking part in the protests.
Mm.
But they also mention that the protests are like in Esfahan, they're not as big as they were in 2019. Like
Mm.
in 2019, in my neighborhood, it was really massive.
Mhm.
And so there was also more crackdown by
Mm.
the police. But this time, it's different. And I mean, it's natural because this is an issue that is not the number one priority of the people. They have grievances about it, but it's not number one because we're under sanctions. We are under unilateral coercive measures by the United States that makes it very difficult to even buy medicine.
Mm.
And for example, there's this disease that kids usually get, EB disease, or they also call it the butterfly disease, and they require special wound dressing. And Iran used to buy them from Sweden. The Swedish company that provided Iranians with that wound dress refused to sell them to Iran, citing U.S. sanctions.
Mm.
And people have been dying from that disease. I had family members who had cancer, and after the sanctions got, like, especially after Trump withdrew from the JCPOA, it became very difficult to just get the medicine.
Mm.
So this is why I personally cannot believe any claim that comes from the West that they care about the lives and the human rights of Iranians. It's
Mm-hmm.
absolutely hypocritical, and they are in no moral position to like teach Iranians or to say that we're supporting you, we're supporting Iranian women. They're absolutely not supporting anything within Iran. If they wanted, they would have lifted the sanctions. The sanctions actually affect Iranian women more than men. Like it takes away a lot of. We are already struggling with a lot of things here. I personally, as a woman, have a lot of grievances. I want fundamental changes with that, and not I'm just talking about um like all women, Iranian women, like they have a lot of grievances, and hijab, the mandatory hijab or the morality police is one of them, but it's not the number one. Like for example, a lot of women want more equality in job, or for example, more rights in marriage.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of issues that are like affect all women, and they are like more serious for us. And even for the mandatory hijab, there are a lot of people who are working inside for women's rights,
Mm-hmm.
and the bogus support that comes from outside makes their struggles a lot more difficult, because it becomes very easy for the states to label it as like foreign funded. Like they're going to say that, okay, you're working willingly or unwillingly for the cause that comes from outside. And it takes away. And uh, I don't know if you know about this NY piece where the notorious Mahsa Amini claimed that she is the leader of the movement in Iran. It
Yep.
made a lot of Iranians inside and outside Iran very angry. It was outrageous because she dares take the agency and the credit away from Iranian women. No, that she is paid by the U.S. government. That's not a secret that I'm telling you. It's out there. One can go online and find her pay slips. She has a photo with Mike Pompeo, who imposed sanctions on Iran, and who was a part of Trump's government, who assassinated our hero, who also said that would attack Iranian cultural sites, who like they openly take pride in sabotage, in coup d'etats, in supporting terrorists, for example, the MEK terrorists, to assassinate our nuclear scientists and everything. And she dares say that she is the leader of a movement that Iranian women are leading. I mean, naturally, the riot police does not treat you peacefully. When there is a riot, please. I'm not justifying what they're doing at all, but I'm saying that's what happens, sadly, everywhere in the world. But these women know that, and they take to the streets because they want to express what the change that they are demanding,
Mm-hmm.
and they are risking their lives. But she sits in Washington, in New York, in her mansion, and it gets paid and wants to take the credit for what women in Iran are doing. And these things are the things that make a lot of Iranians angry, and they don't want to take part. They don't want to be a part of the rhetoric that supports her, even
So
though it looks
this seems like it started out as an internal issue, right? It was an internal grievance. Um,
exactly,
and even if Mahsa Amini was not killed by the police, the concept of the morality police and how they enforce the laws was something that a lot of Iranians take onus to. So when did this become, why do you think that the Western mainstream media really wrote on this and uh, championed this cause 24/7? It still is being reported 24/7. Millions of hashtags are, on Twitter and
exactly.
Instagram. It's really, like this is the thing that they're really choosing to focus on. So why do you think that is?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the Saudi-funded Iran International media outlet did a piece on how, and they were like taking pride in how the hashtag for Mahsa Amini in Farsi and in English broke a record, a historical record on Twitter. And it really seriously poses the question as like, was the tragic death of Mahsa Amini in custody the most important and pressing issue of the world in a decade? So, and because
Al Jazeera just did a post on that today. They said that the journalist was like, all Iranian women, you know, are against this, and this is the worst thing I've covered in my 20 years of journalism work. So that's something that we're hearing a lot of, is that,
yeah,
this is the most pressing issue. Why?
yeah. I mean, that makes me. I mean, it's difficult to identify what exactly is behind that, but we are so used to these, CIA campaigns against Iran that for those who are into, because I also did propaganda analysis for my PhD, for my dissertation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easy to identify that something is fishy there. And there are, as I said, like John Bolton and Pompeo, they take pride in having carried out coup d'etats and color revolutions and propaganda campaign around the world, like openly. So it's easy to identify that this is not, because as someone who lives in Iran, I go on the streets, I ask my families, and what I see is very different from what I observe online. It's so exaggerated. And it makes me wonder what is behind that. And because I know the history of the CIA campaigns against Iran, and even like on Twitter, some researchers have done a few years ago a research on how some of these hashtags are become a trend on Twitter, and there are so many, like there are bots behind them, there are CIA agents behind them, and there's at one point there were like fake accounts, including there's an account called Hishmat Alavi. I would recommend people to search that as a fake account. It's still there, and there are a lot of people who don't think that's a fake account, but they tracked where this comes from, and a lot of them come from, at some point they tracked where those hashtags become trendy, especially about Iran, and they tracked them to the MEK camp in Albania. So we have all these in our mind, and when something like this happens that does not like genuinely reflect what is actually happening here in Iran, it makes people. Hey,
So,
I
welcome back.
apologize. This is something out of my control.
No
But
worries.
I mean, actually, I'm happy that because I think it was yesterday that I was planning to have another live, and it was absolutely impossible. We couldn't do it.
Oh,
So
but
at least we can do
I'll take
something.
this. I'll take this.
Yes.
Um, so
Yeah.
so going back to what you were saying, um, there has been a lot of footage that I've personally gotten a hold of that the mainstream media hasn't shown at all, which is the millions and hundreds of thousands of people marching in support of the government. Can you tell me more about that? Like, what is the, aside from the grievances, is there a majority support and love for the leadership and the government?
Yeah, of course. I mean, uh, if you know about the Iranian society and how diversities, how it is not like any other society, it is not a monolithic society. There are various opinions inside, and like it's like you can be even a supporter and an admirer of the supreme leader, but be against the morality police. You can
Mhm.
be taking to the streets to protest, but do not seek regime change. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like it's not that like you can say, okay, anyone who takes on the streets is absolutely against the for example, supreme leader against the quote unquote regime, and they just want the collapse of the regime. That's not the case. It's
Mhm.
that we live in a country where, with all the problems that we have, with all the grievances that we have, uh, we want to come to the streets and make our demands. And sometimes sometimes we do it with how we elect our parliament members, our presidents, and different bodies that we have, and we have elections for them. Sometimes we feel that we're not heard, so we take to the streets. And and I should say that a part of these protests getting violent is because people are angry. It's not always that there are people agents from outside, but there are also agents from outside who want to abuse these protests and uh, like uh, just how do you say, like, hijack it or set people.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm really sorry.
Well,
It,
what were you saying? You can continue.
um, what was I saying? You have to remind me
We,
with all
we,
the.
we were
Yeah.
talking about that how this started as internal grievances, and then there
Mm.
could be foreign disruptors hijacking the protests.
Yeah. So yes, as I said, a lot of the anger is, I think, is understandable, and when you take part in it, people can get excited. They have their grievances, and when there is a crowd, things can get out of control. But there are also agents within the protesters that I feel they are trying to uh, get the protest out of its the path that he has to go until the protesters are heard. So it makes it very difficult to take part in the protest and not um, like witness some violent acts like setting people's cars on fire or attacking police officers. That so far a lot of people have died, including police officers and just passerbys. I remember even in 2019,
Hmm.
in my neighborhood, one man was killed just passing by watching the incident. So
Hmm.
it can get really violent and out of control, and it's really tragic and sad.
Hmm. Hmm. So would you define this as an Iranian revolution, the way the mainstream media is?
Absolutely not. I mean, it's really far from anything like a revolution. It's definitely very important because this time is like it was started by women, and women are the central part of these protests, so it's very important, and it's a social issue. It's not only economic. There is also a class element to it, but it's mainly a social issue, and so I think it's a very important like I would say uprising or protest.
Hmm.
We see unprecedented for example, the state TV is trying to be more inclusive, giving platform to people from like figures that you would never expect to be invited on the state TV to speak about the issue, and you can hear all sorts of conversations, which I hope remains in place even after the protest. And they Because that's something that we need. We really need dialogue, and the one thing that really worries me is that a division is created in the society with the
Hmm.
rhetoric that like the mainstream media outside Iran is producing, and also the a part of the rhetoric that the government is also producing here, which tries to ignore the voices of the people who are protesting in some way. Uh, and I think that's why I think we need more dialogue. We need people to talk about it. We need to sit down and peacefully sort out all the issues and problems that we have.
Hmm.
And I think that the message that these protests are making, especially because that's another like important factor about these protests, that the people who are protesting are usually the younger generation, people who are even not in their 20s yet or in their early 20s, and they are totally different from, for example, my generation. We were maybe more cautious. We were uh, our demands were slightly different, but these people, these young people are, they have no consideration when it comes to making their demands. So this is how these protests are very important. But it's absolutely far from a revolution, and and I think it's a totally miscalculation to think that this is a revolution that is going to happen.
Okay. So, would you say this is anyone's business but the Iranian people? Is it the business
Yeah,
of?
absolutely. Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
that's where,
Especially,
where I was getting at with with this whole conversation is like, what is the role of Americans and American media is like, we're covering this 24/7. Um, this seems like it's an internal issue that the Iranians need to really figure out. Um, is this something for the US to come in and try to save the day?
absolutely not. If the US really cares about Iranian people, they have to lift the sanctions as soon as possible. The sanctions are just hurting ordinary people. They are killing people. They are taking opportunities away from women. It's absolutely hypocritical. And I don't think anyone in Iran, yeah, I mean, there are probably a minority who believe what the US is saying in being willing to defend their women in Iran or people in Iran, but I don't think the majority of the Iranians believe that, because they have been targeted by sanctions, they have been targeted by assassinations. The MAK terrorist group has assassinated our scientists, and they were trained by Mossad. And the US and the European Union delisted them from the terrorist list, and they started funding them. How can we believe that these people care about us, about our rights? And I also have met people like from outside Iran who probably have very genuine intention. I mean, they really care about Iranians and they think that's the way to help Iranian women, but it really is not. It's better for them to stay totally outside it. This is an internal issue. And we know how to. Iranian women are very powerful. Iranian people are very powerful. We have had so many social uprising and protests over the past years, and it shows that our people know how to make demands. We have also had a lot of reforms in our laws, in laws concerning women or other human rights issues. And it just shows that Iranian people know very well how to deal with their government, how to demand changes, and how to pursue their demands. They do not need any help from outside. If there is any help to come, it's just for the sanctions to be lifted. And I mean, it's so unprofessional in terms of journalism, it's very unprofessional that you do not even want to echo the voice of Iranian women. They do not want to let you, like, I haven't seen any women from Iran speaking about the situation. I mean, being given a voice to speak about the situation in Iran. There are very few people who have been speaking about it. And there's so much. I mean, the discourse, this, as they call it, infocracy, does not allow for you. I mean, it's a red line. There's no way you can cross this red line of challenging the mainstream narrative. It's not only about Iran. We had it on a lot of other issues previously. That's true about, for example, the war in Ukraine, about COVID, about what happened in Syria, about what happened in Iraq, on a lot of those things. But I think because more Iranians have been trying to show the realities of what is happening inside Iran, and for probably other reasons. As you said, I can see that mainstream media is a little bit backing down because they know they probably have, because at some point everyone was like, oh, a revolution is happening. And I know a lot of people who inside Iran and outside Iran, we're thinking, oh, something is really happening. Like it's so we're going to see a different government. We're going to see the collapse of this quote unquote regime.
I thought we lost you.
Yeah, yeah. It's just the connection is really
We just
terrible.
have to
Yeah,
push through. We have to push through.
yeah.
You were talking specifically about regime change. So from what I'm hearing, do the Iranians like, want a regime change? And obviously, there is a benefit to the United States for a new regime. They've been trying this since the 1979 revolution. So what are your thoughts on, an entirely new regime?
Well, I think that's far from what the majority of the Iranians want. And I'm not talking based on my feelings or anything. You people can search and see the surveys, for example, for the elections that we have had and like the participation of the people. And there are many surveys done by international researchers that show that. So I'm not going to address that. But also, Iranians understand very well because the Iranian population is politically very informed because of all the things that we have gone through, because of the revolution and the sanctions, war, and all the things that we have been going through, and because how it affects people's everyday life. They're always trying to keep informed about what is going on. So they totally understand how the collapse of this current establishment is not would not really help the Iranian society at all. It is something that they have seen the experience in Syria, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and they know this is not what they want. And no matter how long reforms may take, they're patiently seeking the reforms that they want to see in their society, and it obviously benefits the U.S. and the Zionist regime. So I mean, and these two
You're not
regimes.
supposed to say Zionist. Remember,
Okay.
you have to say PZ with the pianist. That's
Okay.
the blocked out one.
Okay.
Let's see.
Okay.
Let's see now if
Yeah.
Instagram is gonna let us post this video.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. I am because there's a lot of, freedom
Yeah,
of speech on these social media.
yeah,
So we have to respect the freedom of speech laws that exist. Yeah, actually, I reported the death threat that I got on Twitter, and Twitter immediately sent me a reply saying that the tweet that I were reporting did not violate their
yeah.
terms, which is really interesting because it was an open, absolute call for people to go and kill me in my city. So
Uh-huh.
it's really interesting. Yeah, but I'm going to be more careful about using the term
Yeah.
so we
No,
don't get into trouble.
we're
It's,
on an uphill battle here.
I know, I know. It's really, yeah,
Yeah. Well, I
it's
really hope
really,
that they allow this video to get posted. If not, we'll keep trying. We'll have another interview and another one after that.
yeah, I know.
Um,
Yes.
yeah, that's why are you getting death threats? Why are they so threatened by an honest, on ground, uh, very balanced perspective of what's going on in Iran?
Well, I think a part of it is comes from Iranians who unfortunately are affected by the propaganda, and they have it's sometimes amazing for me how they cannot understand the reality of what they're living. I mean, this is probably like a very small minority because in my personal experience, I haven't seen a lot of people with that mentality that they totally ignore what they are living and they just rely on outside sources to understand the reality of their lives. So a part of it is from Iranians who are angry, have grievances. A greater part of it comes from Iranian expats who I mean, you probably saw videos of some of the Iranian expats trying to attack the Iranian embassy in London,
Yeah.
and it got so they they injured police officers there too.
Mm.
And I yeah, I mean, a few minutes ago, a friend shared with me a link where the police in London has published the images of 13 people who took part in that violent protest around the embassy.
Hello.
Hello. I'm really
Um,
sorry for this. I wasn't expecting
no
it to be so rough. Yeah.
worries. Well, your last thought
So,
was
and
about the violence in England.
yeah. So I was thinking, like, imagine if the Iranian government published the images of those who took part in those riots and asked people to identify them and report them to the police. I'm sure it would be a really huge deal. But I mean, a lot of those people are from the same mentality. Some of them are MEK supporters, some of them are Pahlavi supporters, and these people, I mean, that's why Iranians don't want a regime change, because when they see these people who have absolutely zero tolerance for any different opinion and they can attack people, send them death threats, that's why they don't want a different regime, a different establishment. They feel okay, it's better to stick with this one and try to pursue the changes that we have. And it's also true that like with all the things that have been happening in the Middle East, Iran has been very stable. Iran is a very strong country, and we have like women have had a lot of improvement after the revolution. That's something that you can ask any women, and they will tell you how the revolution was actually liberating for a lot of women. They haven't
Mhm.
forgotten that. People have not forgotten the history of what they went through during the Pahlavi regime. They
What,
know about
what
those
did
things.
they? What did they? I mean, for people who don't know, what did they go through? Why, why is this regime better than what the Shah had? Even if, for example, for someone who might not be religious.
Well, there are famous interviews with with the previous Shah, the last Shah of Iran, where he's asked about women and women's rights, even his own wife, and you have to see that how he thinks that women should not have a place, should not be empowered, and they should never take leading roles in politics, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was born after the revolution, but I have heard stories from my parents, from my family, and they tell me how, I mean, a lot of the ideals of the revolution have not been fulfilled yet. But people haven't forgotten that women, not just women, but also men, there was a lot of poverty. There was like the intelligence service of the Shah, which worked with Mossad and CIA. They had really terrible methods of torture, and these are all documented. And they haven't forgotten how the
So, Sitar, a note I just wrote to myself as you were describing what the regime of the Shah was like and how a lot of these expats want that back. Isn't it ironic that they're writing on a cause that is for women's rights, but didn't really, like it's not making sense to me. The
I
Shah's regime
didn't
was not for women's rights.
I didn't hear you for a few seconds. Can you please repeat your question?
Yes, I was saying the Shah's regime was not for women's rights. So isn't it ironic that they're writing on a campaign that's for women's rights?
It is absolutely ironic and hypocritical, and a lot of Iranians with all the grievances that they have, even some of the people who want a different establishment, they have made it clear to the Pahlavi, and you should see Iranian comments on, for example, Reza Pahlavi's Twitter account, how people haven't forgotten. They know what these people have done to these people, I mean, the Pahlavi regime has done to these people. They have not forgotten it. And it wasn't only women, but like everyone, but also women. And for example, like the social well in terms of social welfare, in terms of medicine, in terms of science, in terms of universities, women's participation in the government, women's participation in the society, literacy rates, and like a lot of those things, we have become a lot more powerful.
Mm-hmm. So, to wrap it up, let's bring the conversation back to the West, right? You spoke about the Islamophobic incident that happened in England, for example. Do you believe that, the coverage that this has gotten is we're going to be seeing an uptick of Islamophobic, hijabophobic, Iranophobic cases around the world. And as this global war on terror in the United States continues, it's still going on. How do you think all of this is going to fit in with that narrative?
With which narrative? Again, I got disconnected for
the
a few
the
seconds.
narrative of Islamophobia and hijabophobia, painting a woman in hijab as oppressed, and just Iranophobia, like hatred towards Iranian people or pro-Iran people.
Yeah, yes, the Orientalist and yeah, Islamophobic and Iranophobic uh, the narrative is it's not that open. It's all
For example, there are a few figures within the opposition, not the real oppositions, I mean the CIA-backed oppositions like Messi, Ali, that like maybe accidentally it slips out of their tongue and they reveal the hatred that they have for Islam and for Iran.
Mhm.
But because they know that Iranians still have respect for a lot of those Islamic values, they do not bring it like it's not so straightforward, but you can understand. Like, for example, one example is that you have always seen these memes of Iranian women before the revolution and Iranian women after the revolution, and there is this picture of women like with very short clothes and revealing clothes, and
Mhm.
then you have women in, for example, chador or full hijab, and they
Mhm.
say this is the revolution, and that takes out of context all the positive things that have happened to Iranian women
Mhm.
with the revolution. They do not talk about, I mean, how do you take the dress code, like the way people dress, as a sign of progress? What does that
Right.
mean? It's women's choice. That was women's choice, and it's this one is also women's choice. So, uh, and you have to come to Iran and go to universities, go to hospitals, medical facilities, engineers, like the famous, for example, Tabiat Bridge, which is in Tehran, and it's a beautiful architecture, which is like very recent, was designed by a woman. We
Mhm.
have women who are pilots, where we have women who are doctors, who are scientists, who are university professors. Uh, uh, a great percentage of university students are females, for example, and these are all taken out of context and these are not addressed. Then you just have a meme of Iranian women in miniskirts before the revolution, Iranian women in chadors after the revolution, and you show it to people and are like, oh, they're so oppressed and their rights have been taken away and everything, but they don't
Mhm.
know about the other things that have also happened to these Iranian women. So this
Mhm.
is how I think this is also I think this is also Islamophobic. Like you're showing people that one Islamic value that people are willingly following is a sign of oppression, is a
Mhm.
sign of like repression by uh, a regime or whatever. So
Mhm.
I think it's this Iranophobic and Islamophobic portrayal of what is happening in Iran is not very straightforward. Like it's
Mhm.
more stealth, but it is there. And if you like pay attention to it, you can easily detect that.
Thank you so much, Setareh. This was a very enlightening conversation. I myself learned a lot, and I'm sure the audience will too. I think it's very important for media to highlight women's voices, especially those who are in who we are speaking about. You can't talk about someone without having them be part of the conversation and tell their story. And that's what we hope to do at TMJ. We're new, but inshallah, we can put our stories forward. We can put our values and voices forward. And we thank you again for coming on here. It was a
Thank you.
pleasure
Thank
speaking to
you.
you.
Thank you for having me. And I really appreciate that you care about giving Iranian women who live in Iran a voice, to giving them a platform to speak what they are experiencing. And I would never want to let anyone frame my firsthand experience of living in Iran. And I like, this is like, I'm very happy that you gave me this platform to tell just I'm one voice from Iran. Obviously, I do not represent everyone here, but I'm one voice from Iran, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who agree with me and a lot of people who disagree with me. But it's important to hear from the people who actually live here.
I agree. Thank you again, Setareh, and I'll see you all next time.